I'm Nima Rajan. As of this morning, Canada has lost 30,000 lives to COVID-19. 9 more deaths in Ontario pushed the country past this grim milestone. And health experts are sounding the alarm about the threat caused by the Omicron variant, urging people to get vaccinated and get their booster shots as soon as they are eligible. Experts say vaccines have significantly limited COVID-19 deaths. Some estimates indicate they have resulted in between 75% and 90% fewer deaths in each age group. This is compared to what would have been expected. Meanwhile, Ontario is reporting its highest daily COVID-19 case count since mid-May, with 2,421 new infections. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Kieran Moore is estimating the Omicron variant could be up to 8 times more contagious than Delta. Ontario's panel of COVID-19 expert advisors is calling for what it calls a circuit breaker. These public health measures could cut contacts by 50% to blunt the worst of Omicron's impact. The science table says that without any further measures, there could be 10,000 daily new cases before Christmas. Defense Minister Anita Anand says the government is still discussing a promise to provide a 200-soldier quick reaction force to the United Nations for peacekeeping. But she says the discussions are also taking Canada's other international commitments into consideration. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau first promised the soldiers to a future UN mission 4 years ago and is under pressure from the UN and Washington to fulfill Canada's commitment. The Parliamentary Budget Officer is now estimating the cost of building 2 new polar icebreakers for the Canadian Coast Guard is at $7.25 billion. Back in 2013, the government said the project would cost $1.3 billion. But at that point, it only planned to build 1 heavy icebreaker. Yves Giroux says the government's plan to have the ships built at shipyards in Vancouver and Quebec City is also a factor in the much higher cost estimate. The Supreme Court of Canada has agreed to examine the constitutionality of the 17-year-old Safe Third Country Agreement between Ottawa and Washington on asylum seekers. Under the terms of the pact, Canada can turn back potential refugees who show up along the border. This on the basis that they must pursue their claims within the U.S., which is the country where they first arrived. Canadian refugee advocates argue that some refugees have been imprisoned in the U.S., and that it is not always a safe country for people fleeing persecution. Canada is one of the world's biggest producers of raw metals and minerals, and it wants to become a crucial part of the supply chain in the production of electric vehicles and their batteries. Canada has slipped to 5th place in the most important players in the world's lithium-ion battery supply chain. This is because of its environmental stewardship. The Mining Association of Canada says potential clients need to get the message that if they care about climate, the environment, and how people are treated, including Indigenous people, then buying from Canada is the right thing to do. Wholesale sales climbed to a record high of $72.5 billion in October. Statistics Canada reports auto sector sales powered the 1.4% increase for the month. This comes as automakers secured semiconductor chips that have been in short supply. 5 of the 7 subsectors the agency tracks climbed higher in October. This comes with sales of motor vehicles and motor vehicle parts and accessories rising 7.1% to $10.8 billion. Well, the pandemic has prompted a lot of Canadians to make changes in their lives. This ranges from taking up a hobby, to getting fit, to quitting their jobs or leaving relationships. A new report from human resources software company Ceridian looks into this issue. It says 84% of just over 1,300 Canadian workers surveyed by Hanover Research felt burnt out over the last 2 years. Another thing people have been quitting is their marriages. Statistics Canada says about 2.7 million people obtained a legal divorce in 2020. And the Winnipeg Blue Bombers coaches and players made the most of Grey Cup celebrations pandemic style. They couldn't hold a massive street parade like the one the CFL team held in 2019 when it ended a 30-year-old championship drought. So they piled into the back of pickup trucks last night and paraded the trophy they won in Hamilton on Sunday to celebrate in front of Winnipeg fans on their home field. Bombers head coach Mike O'Shea told a few thousand fully vaccinated fans at IG Field how much they are all appreciated, and that delivering Winnipeg a back-to-back championship feels phenomenal. All right, we'll be right back after the break with more stories from around Canada and the world. But first, we take a look at the investing outlook for 2022. Stay tuned. Stocks wobbled in morning trading on Wall Street on Thursday as investors study moves by central banks to fight rising inflation. The S&P 500 rose 0.1% and is hovering around the record high it reached last Friday. The tech-heavy Nasdaq slipped 0.7%, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.5%. On Wednesday, the Federal Reserve of the U.S. announced an acceleration of its pullback of economic stimulus as it pivots to fighting inflation. Heading into the new year, it seems inflation and the response to the latest Omicron variant of COVID-19 are what investors are likely keeping their eyes on. Well, joining us now to give us his outlook for 2022 is Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Limited. Brendan, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Nima, always great to be here. Thank you.
Always great to have you, Brendan. So now that 2021 is almost over, what are you telling your clients regarding investing in portfolios?
Well, as that great New York philosopher Yogi Berra was thought to have said, it ain't over till it's over. So 2021 still got a couple more weeks in it, maybe a couple more surprises. I think my gut feeling is 2022 should be really good. It may not start well because with, as you mentioned in your introduction, markets hitting record highs, it wouldn't be surprising to see people do some selling in early January. But I think that might be for longer term investors a bit of a head fake. What has kept markets going so strongly, if there's a single thing, it's been low interest rates. What you alluded to the last little bit was that central banks, which control short-term rates, may look at doing something to curb inflation, and that's something maybe to raise rates. But we'll see if there's a one-to-one correlation between somewhat rising rates and a difficult stock market. I'm not sure that there will be a perfect correlation there.
All right, lots to keep our eyes out for, Brendan. Well, we know the last day for tax loss selling is Wednesday, December 29th. Settlement is Friday, December 31st. So why are these dates important to investors in particular?
Well, this year it may be more important than ever, maybe. I would be surprised if the Canadian government, I'm not suggesting this is a hint, Christia, Justin, I'm not saying you should do this, but I wouldn't be surprised if capital gains tax rates were raised in 2022. At present, capital gains only attract half the tax that income does. So if you buy or sell a stock or a property or French wine or a group of 7 paintings, it doesn't matter. If you realize a capital gain, you get taxed at half the income rate. But I wouldn't be surprised to see that rate ratchet up. So you may see people wanting to sell in 2021 to avoid whatever tax hikes might be coming next year. The thing I would pause about, though, is that any investment decision ever done for tax reasons, possibly in the history of the world, I might be overstating the case, but not by much, any investment decision done for tax reasons turns out to be a mistake because you can't anticipate the tax, and just because you do something for tax doesn't mean it's a good investment decision. So it's important if you want to take tax gains this year, and I think a number of people will be taking tax gains looking forward to next year, but only do it if you have compelling personal reasons to do that, not because you're trying to get ahead of the tax man, because whatever they end up doing will probably surprise all of us.
All right, Brendan. So how should investors prepare their portfolios for 2022?
Well, assuming you come to the market completely uninvested, you're looking at me and saying, Brendan, these markets are at record highs. What should I do? And my answer to them is something. Now, whether you're fully invested or fully uninvested, I think you should do something. If you're fully invested and you say, Brendan, in the next year or two, I'm going to need X amount of money, and I want to make sure that I have the capital to pay for that, then I would say, let's sell a little bit of what you have. Maybe it's 25% or 20% or some number, just to take some money off the table. But I think even more importantly, if you've got no money invested, start with doing a little bit. If you have an amount of money that you're going to invest, take 20% of it, 25% of it, and start now and do something. Because either way, if markets go down or if they go up, you'll at least be in a good headspace. Because if markets go down and you need to buy more or sell more, no problem, you've done something. And if markets go up and you need to buy more or sell more, you've done something. Once you've done something, the next right thing becomes that much easier. Investing is really less about numbers and more about psychology, and particularly one's own psychology. So for most people, the right thing to do, particularly for younger people, start a monthly contribution plan. Start a pack where you're putting a little bit of money aside every month.
And we'll be right back. Canadian Blood Services has recommended that Health Canada end the ban on sexually active gay men donating blood. The proposal is backed by research suggesting donor screening should instead focus on high-risk behaviors, including having multiple sexual partners, regardless of a person's orientation. Canada introduced a lifetime ban for gay men in 1992, partly because of HIV. In 2013, it allowed blood to be accepted from a man who abstained from sex with another man for 5 years. The waiting period dropped to 3 months in 2019. And with us to discuss what the newly proposed changes could mean is Dr. Stan Houston, Professor of Medicine and Public Health at the University of Alberta and Director of the Northern Alberta HIV Program. Dr. Houston, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thanks very much for having me.
So we have a lot to unpack here, Doctor. Let's start with the current donor criteria for blood donation by gay and bisexual men compared to others.
Okay, well, I think the situation has changed profoundly since the 80s or 92. I'm not quite sure what the rules were before 1992, but there were very strict rules from the first recognition of HIV. But a lot of things have changed. So first of all, the implications of the disease have changed profoundly, and I think the public perception has followed that more or less. So HIV was not only correctly recognized as a fatal disease back in the day, but it carried a special emotional, psychological load as well. And now, of course, not that I would ever want to make light of HIV. It's definitely better to prevent it. But someone who's diagnosed early with HIV can have essentially a healthy, normal life expectancy, taking usually just one tablet a day. And I think the public has kind of caught on to that. And of course, the tests that we have available now are way better than back in the day. And we've got a lot of experience with the tests and their efficacy.
All right, Doctor, let's go over this newly proposed process by CBS. What would this process look like, and what are your thoughts on this from a scientific perspective?
Well, the process is that gay men would be treated like other Canadians if they apply or offer to provide a blood donation.
All right, sir. And taking a look at the science behind this a little bit more in particular, what do we know so far about the likeliness of blood-borne diseases like HIV and AIDS being transmitted through blood donation in particular?
If there were no protections in place, testing, the risk is very high. If you have someone with HIV infection that donates blood, the risk of transmission is close to 100%. But the point is that we now can identify and therefore exclude individuals who are infected with a very high degree of efficacy.
And I guess one of the bigger questions here would be whether the sexual or gender orientation of a person has any impact on the risk of sexual transmission of HIV in the first place, Doctor.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you think about it, it's kind of illogical that an individual, a heterosexual individual who might have quite risky sexual practices, although they might not perceive them to be that risky themselves, or possibly to have a risk they weren't aware of. For example, to have a partner who was a past injection drug user or immigrant from a country with high rates of heterosexual HIV. So that person would be allowed to donate, and someone who might be in a monogamous gay relationship would not. And that's kind of not entirely logical, and it's kind of discriminatory.
Dr. Houston, thank you again for your insight into this on Forum Daily, sir. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks for your interest. Bye-bye.
We'll be back after the break with a look at stories from around the world. The European Union is threatening Russia with sanctions amid fears of an invasion into Ukraine. European Union leaders are looking to avoid a Russian military invasion into neighboring Ukraine with the threat of unprecedented sanctions and the promise of diplomatic talks. Russia's massing of troops on the Ukraine border takes center stage at today's summit of the 27 government leaders. It is reinforced by the plea of Ukraine's president to start imposing more sanctions before any possible incursion, rather than after the border has been crossed. Meanwhile, Russia says it has submitted draft documents outlining security arrangements it wants to negotiate with the United States and its NATO allies. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov says a senior Russian envoy stands ready to depart for talks in a neutral country. He says President Vladimir Putin may have another call with U.S. President Joe Biden before the year's end. In a video call last week, Mr. Biden voiced concern about a buildup of Russian troops near Ukraine's border. Mr. Putin has denied plans of launching an invasion. Security pros say it's one of the worst computer vulnerabilities they have ever seen. They say state-backed Chinese and Iranian hackers and rogue cryptocurrency miners have already exploited the flaw in the widely used Log4j utility. The Department of Homeland Security is sounding the alarm, ordering federal agencies to urgently eliminate the bug. The affected software is small and often undocumented. The flaw lets internet-based hackers seize control of everything from industrial control systems to consumer electronics. The Bank of England has raised its key interest rates to combat surging consumer prices. Today's move makes it the first central bank among the world's leading economies to do so since the COVID-19 pandemic began. The increase in the bank's main rate to 0.25% from the record low of 0.1% was a surprise given the rapid spread of the Omicron variant of COVID-19. Turkey's central bank has again cut interest rates despite soaring consumer prices that are making it difficult for people to buy food and other basic goods. The move on Thursday sent the country's currency to record lows against the U.S. dollar. The bank cut a key rate from 15% to 14%, though inflation is running at 21%. It is in line with the policies of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who has been pressing for low borrowing costs to boost growth and exports, as well as investments. New witness accounts allege that thousands of ethnic Tigrayans have been forcibly expelled, detained, or killed in one of the most inaccessible areas of Ethiopia's year-long war. Thursday's joint statement by Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International cites interviews with more than 30 witnesses and relatives. It follows a report by the Associated Press earlier last month citing people who fled. Bangladesh has marked 50 years of victory over Pakistan in a war for independence by hosting a military parade with the Indian president as guest of honor. On December 16, 1971, Pakistani soldiers surrendered to a joint India-Bangladesh force after 9 months of fighting. This formally made Bangladesh a new nation under the leadership of independence leader Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. the father of current Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. A former employee of Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba says human resources and upper management wouldn't address her accusation of sexual assault. So she went into the busy cafeteria at the headquarters of Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba and screamed out her plight. Now she's paying the price. The company fired her. She also faces online harassment, accusations of lying from the wives of the two men she accused, and a defamation lawsuit from Alibaba's vice president, who was forced to resign. One person has died as a powerful storm system swept across America's Great Plains and Midwest last night. The storms closed highways and spawned at least 13 reported tornadoes within Nebraska and Iowa. The U.S. National Weather Service says the storm is shifting north of the Great Lakes today with high winds and snow. Environment Canada has issued wind warnings and a special weather statement for much of Ontario today. A gang in Haiti has released all remaining hostages from the Ohio-based Christian Aid Ministries missionary group. 17 members of the group, including one Canadian, were captured 2 months ago. 5 had already been released. Police didn't release any details on the health of the hostages. Making gingerbread houses is a fun holiday tradition, but Natalie Salerno took things to a new level. The young baker has made epic candy creations of famous buildings, including the motel from Schitt's Creek. I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time.